It's often said that the happiest people in the world are secretly the saddest. Often the most jolly and kind-hearted folks you know are the ones struggling with their own tragedies. If there's one person from the silent era who fits this description, it would be Roscoe Arbuckle. One of the most loved faces from the very early days of motion pictures, he was a gentle giant who worked with, mentored, and left his mark alongside stars like Charlie Chaplin, Mabel Normand, Mack Sennett, and my favorite filmmaker, Buster Keaton, which makes his story all the more heartbreaking to learn about, especially with the scandal that still haunts him to this day. Roscoe Arbuckle was born on March 24, 1887 in Smith Center, Kansas, to Mary E. Gordon and William Goodrich Arbuckle. Coming in at a whopping 13 pounds, his dad believed this to be a sign of him being illegitimate, and his resentment of this child resulted in him being named after Roscoe Conkling, a New York senator who Goodrich hated. Sadly, his relationship with his dad never improved, largely due to his birth resulting in Mary having chronic health issues for the rest of her life. Despite this, Roscoe's mom adored and encouraged him to sing and perform once the family moved to Santa Ana, California. At the age of 8, he made his stage debut in Frank Bacon's Traveling Company. It was a happy moment in his early life that contrasted with the hardships he initially experienced. He kept performing in local shows until his mom's death when he was 11. By this point, his dad wanted nothing to do with him and just abandoned him. A hotel at San Jose took him in and gave him room and food in exchange for helping with odd jobs. The hotel musician Pansy Jones took him under her wing, and his singing led him to enter a local talent show. During his performance, the audience wasn't getting any big laughs, and when this happened during this time, the performer was pulled off with a shepherd's crook. Yes, that kind of shepherd's crook. And just before they could yank him away, he fell into the orchestra and the audience loved it. Arbuckle would work the theater circuit until 1909. By that point, he married actress Araminta Estella Jaffe and took up with the Selig Piloscope Company, making his film debut in Ben's Kid. Over the next 5 years, he moved around to different studios and eventually landed at Mack Sennett's Keystone Studio as one of his Keystone Cops. Making $40 a week, roughly $1,300 in today's money, this was where Roscoe Arbuckle would become one of the most beloved faces in the world. This was both from his natural talent and his chemistry with his fellow co-stars, his most popular ones being Mack Sennett, who often starred in his own work, Mabel Normand, Charlie Chaplin, who learned the ropes of filmmaking alongside him, and Buster Keaton, who we'll get into in just one moment. And just like Sennett, he quickly took on the roles of editor and director in his own works as well. He soon set up his own studio, the Komiki Film Corporation, and this was where, in 1917, he became fast friends with Joseph Frank Buster Keaton. Keaton had been a star on the stage since he was 10 months old, and fell in love with cinema after their meeting and made his debut in The Butcher Boy. For the next 2 years, the duo worked together and produced 15 iconic shorts. These included The Cook, Oh Doctor, and my personal favorite, Coney Island. Another fun fact about these shorts is Roscoe Arbuckle would also work with his nephew, Al St. John, who was an equally talented comedian in his own right. And while Arbuckle and Keaton went their separate ways, they remained close friends for the rest of his life, and Roscoe signed a $3 million deal, roughly $64,366,000 in today's money with Paramount, on the terms of making 18 full-length features in 3 years. Unfortunately, like many good things in the world, all it took for his to come down was one bad day. On September 5th, 1921, he was hosting a party with his friends at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. He quickly took note of actress Virginia Rapp, who'd fallen ill, and tried to help her by taking her back to bed and getting the hotel doctor. She was hospitalized 2 days later and passed away on September 9th from a ruptured bladder. Immediately, an unfortunate accident became one of the earliest Hollywood scandals, beginning with one of Rapp's acquaintances at the party, Bambina Maud Delmont. Despite doctors finding no evidence of sexual violence at play, Delmont claimed that Roscoe Arbuckle raped and, in turn, caused her death. It's at this point that we need to establish two very important pieces of context that I want you to keep in mind as we continue. 1. Bambina Maud Delmont was a notorious blackmailer who would later on admit that she just made up the story to extort money from him. And 2, like the doctor said, there was no evidence suggesting Rapp had been raped or had any sort of violent interaction with Roscoe Arbuckle, or that anything happened between them at all. Despite this, the claim was all that was needed for the police to arrest him on charges of manslaughter. The prosecutor, Matthew Brady, was sure this would be an easy conviction to make his name. He was aided by newspaper mogul William Randolph Hearst, who also used the tragedy to make headlines with baseless claims to rile up people, even when the baseless claims had very serious consequences. Sound familiar?
If I have to, create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dan.
You had publishers, prosecutors, and several other groups all foaming at the mouth with the easiest scapegoat they could have possibly asked for, resulting in not one, but 3 trials to determine the fates of Roscoe Arbuckle. The first trial began on November 14th, 1921. To give an idea on how far the media went with riling people up, shots were fired at his wife Armanda Gervais while she was simply entering the courthouse. His defense counsel was led by local attorney Gavin McNabb. The prosecutor's first witness was a woman named Betty Campbell, which immediately showed how determined everyone was to bury him. While she initially testified to seeing Arbuckle smile after the alleged rape, Campbell revealed Brady threatened to charge her and several other witnesses with perjury if they didn't testify against him. Another threatened witness was Dr. Arthur Birdsley, who testified Virginia Rapp, like we established a moment ago, never mentioned anything about being assaulted by Arbuckle or that anything happened between them. He also testified there could have been several other reasons for her ruptured bladder, including a bout with cystitis, a chronic bladder infection. On December 4th, the jury reached a 10-2 verdict in favor of acquittal. The deadlocked verdict resulted in a mistrial. Yes, you heard that right. The prosecution threatened several of its witnesses with perjury charges if they did not testify against Arbuckle, and that was not enough for a full-stop vote for acquittal. Especially more surprising, one of the jurors who voted guilty, Helen Hubbard, was the wife of a lawyer with close ties to the DA's office, and she also refused to look at exhibits or read the trial transcripts, and she apparently said that she would vote until, quote, hell freezes over, end quote. The second trial would begin on January 11th of 1922. Given the close victory of the first round, the defense decided to show how confident they were in Arbuckle's innocence by not having him testify this time. This had the exact opposite result with a 10-2 deadlock in favor of a conviction. Oops. Round 3 began on March 13th, and no chances were being taken. They referenced the lack of evidence of sexual activity in Rape's death, the prosecution's threat of perjury charges against their own witnesses, and Arbuckle as the last witness they called, who maintained a clear composure of innocence throughout all 3 trials. And by the end, the jury just needed a couple of minutes to return with a unanimous, not guilty verdict. And not just a verdict, however, they also returned with a statement of apology, an almost non-existent thing in most cases, and the statement read as such: acquittal is not enough for Roscoe Arbuckle. We feel that a great injustice has been done to him. We feel also that it was only our plain duty to give him this exoneration under the evidence, for there was not the slightest proof adduced to connect him in any way with the commission of a crime. He was manly throughout the case and told a straightforward story on the witness stand, which we all believed. This happening at the hotel was an unfortunate affair for which Arbuckle, so the evidence shows, was in no way responsible. We wish him success and hope that the American people will take the judgment of 14 men and women who have sat listening for 31 days to evidence that Roscoe Arbuckle is entirely innocent and free from all blame. But the damage could not be easily fixed. Once the scandal broke, Hollywood was on its toes awaiting what was to come. Out of fear, mainly for their own pockets, the majority of studios turned against him and refused to show any of his work during the trials. One man in particular, William Hayes, the then head of the newly formed MPPDA, the Motion Pictures Producers and Distributors of America, now the Motion Pictures Association, declared him to be an example of Hollywood's quote-unquote poor morals. Even when he was found innocent, most of Hollywood refused to risk bringing him back after what he went through. But one of the few people who never turned away from him was Buster Keaton, who stood strong by him throughout the entire ordeal, maintaining both his innocence and calling out those who dared to declare him guilty without any evidence. When cowboy star William S. Hart declared Arbuckle guilty of rape and murder, Keaton responded with The Frozen North, a spoof on Hart's westerns, and he did not speak to him for 2 years after its release. Keaton also took Arbuckle on as a co-director for his film Sherlock Jr., which, if you haven't seen, is one of the key silent films I highly recommend. Sadly, Arbuckle was so devastated from the ordeal he suffered, he couldn't bring himself to stay on, and it's also unclear, given mainly to the 45-minute runtime, how much of the film he directed or if any of what he directed still survives in 2026. His wife, Araminta Durfee, also divorced him in 1923, leaving him alone, isolated, and depressed. During his hard times, Keaton signed a deal to award him 35% of all profits of his work to help him. He was briefly married to Doris Dean from 1925 to 1929, and would work under his dad's name, William Goodrich, and he did get a few jobs, including the 1927 film Special Delivery. Finally, after enough pressure from fans and fellow stars, Warner Bros. Finally signed him on in 1932 for 6 talking shorts. Even with his sadness, he performed with his beautiful tenor voice and physical prowess.
Hey, what's the idea? You will soon find out.
One would never guess he'd been through one of the most heartbreaking scandals of the silent era. He also married for the 3rd time to Addie Oakley on June 21st, 1932, and signed a new contract with Warner Bros. For a full-length film. But his comeback was not to last. The night after he signed the contract on June 28, 1933, after celebrating what he called the best day of his life, Roscoe Arbuckle went to sleep and never woke up. He suffered a heart attack and passed away in peace at the age of 46. While his story is heartbreaking, his tragedy should not and should never be what he's most remembered for. His talent, good nature, and love for acting are what many film buffs, including me, want to be talked about, so that many people can be introduced to those who pioneered the formats we love today, and so many people can see Roscoe Arbuckle both as a skilled filmmaker and comedian, as well as cinema's gentle giant.